Hello, my name is Dean here from Magical Music, and this video will be about the Chaldean Numerology deep dive into the band Pearl Jam. So what I will cover here is not so much the band names from Mookie Blaylock into Pearl Jam, because that was actually in my intro to Numerology video, as well as the band names. So I mentioned Edward's name, or Eddie, and the other band names you can check out yourself with their birth dates. But what I want to talk about here is the albums and the release dates and the names, and the song release dates and names, because each of the members of Pearl Jam formed the band, but numerology related to each of the bands, each of the albums and songs are actually a lot more interesting to look at. So here is a program that I've developed recently to extract Spotify data, where we can get the albums, the type of album, the band, the tracks, the popularity, the numbers, whether they're explicit songs or not, which isn't exactly accurate, the duration, and so on. I am contemplating doing a video on how this program works. It's a Spotify data extractor that I'm using Python to do, where I can then compare bands with other bands. In this particular case, I'm only looking at Pearl Jam, because their recent album Dark Matter just came out, so I thought it would be interesting to look at how that fares according to previous albums. And so what I've actually done here is I've got a VLOOKUP against the dates of the album, and then looking at the popularity average per album. And you can see that Dark Matter, it is quite a recent album. It is actually outdoing popularity of 10, which is quite interesting. But what I want to look at more in this video is not so much the success, but it's also the karma and the numerology behind the album, which based on the date that was released versus the name of the album, and I'll also go into some of the songs based on the popularity. And the reason I'm doing this for Pearl Jam is because they're the band that I've sort of followed the most over the last 30 years, so I'm aware of all the different albums, all the different songs, and they're also such a strange band that's actually really good analysis to look at. You know, they have had successful albums, like 10 and Versus are continuing to be successful. In fact, the MTV Unplugged, even though it came out well after when it was actually made, is also quite successful, which is quite odd to me, because I thought Nirvana's MTV Unplugged was extremely successful. And then you've got Backspacer. A lot of people, I think, would have thought Yield is actually more popular than Backspacer, but according to Spotify, it's actually the other way around. And Vitalogy comes up after Yield, which a lot of people would also debate. And that's fine to debate, you know, what you like, albums versus songs. I'm not here to do that. You can definitely add discussions in the comments below about that. But what I'm calling out here is any of the numbers that add to compound number. So in fact, you can see here I'm looking at the day compound versus the day single, name compound versus the name single. So obviously the day of the 19th breaks down to a 1, 22 breaks down to a 4, but for a name compound, that's where you really need to use the numerology program, because you can't just figure out what the numbers are without using the Chaldean numerology system. So what I find interesting anyway is that Dark Matter 10 and Verses are all actually very beneficial numbers. I've gone through the 27 a few times really in my introduction, and that's why I'm doing these videos on the 27th, because of the power of the 27. But Verses and Dark Matter both released on the 19th of a month, 19th of April versus 19th of October. And in fact, Backspacer as well was also on the 19th. So 19 represents the Prince of Heaven. 19 is one of the most fortunate and favourable of all compound numbers. It is symbolised as the sun and is called the Prince of Heaven because it indicates victory over all temporal failure and disappointment. It blesses the person or entity represented by it with all of the power of the compound number 10, without the danger of abuse inherent in the 10. This number promises happiness and fulfilment, success in all ventures as well as in the personal life. Of course, if 19 is the name number, it must be considered along with the birth number, which might not be as fortunate. So nothing is perfect, but regardless of the influence of another, possibly negative number, the 19 will smooth the path and greatly dilute any negative vibrations one must deal with in the full numerological analysis. So you can see 19 is actually quite a powerful number, and only Backspacer Versus and dark matter have that, and 10 has the 27. I won't go through the 27 again, but it is kind of similar to the 19. The 22 of vitality is quite an interesting one. I'll go through that one now. The number 22 is submission and caution. 22 is symbolized by the ancients as a good man blinded by the folly of others with a knapsack on his back full of errors. In the image, he seems to offer no defense against a ferocious tiger which is about to attack him. It's a warning number of illusion and delusion. It indicates a good person or entity who lives in a fool's paradise, a dreamer of dreams who awakens only when surrounded by danger. Often I think these numbers would be cool as animations, but when it's often too late, it warns of mistakes in judgment, of placing faith in those who are not trustworthy. If 22 is the birth number, the person it represents should exercise caution and watchfulness, such as these albums, since the birth number cannot be altered. In both the career and personal matters, the karmic obligation here is to be more spiritually aggressive, to realize your own power to change things, to prevent failure by simply ordaining success. When this personal responsibility is recognized, practiced, and finally mastered, the 22 person can be in control of events, no longer blinded by the folly of others, and will see ideas and achievements in dreams realized. And there is a chapter on 4s and 8s. So regardless of that, when we look at the compound numbers, we'll notice that only Vitality has a compound of 26 versus a no code compound of 31. And in fact 31, I mentioned in my intro that I'm a 30. 31 is more intense than a 30. But what I'll do is I'll go through 26 first, which is Vitality, and it would explain why like a lot of people love Vitality, but it's like the karma that went out with it, as the vibrations around it. I mean, you know, you still love Vitality regardless, but 26. So 26 is partnerships. The compound number vibrates in a strange way to a unique kind power, based in compassion and unselfishness with the ability to help others, but not always the self. So 26 is full of contradictions. It warns of dangers, disappointments and failure, especially regarding the ambitions brought about through bad advice, association with others, and unhappy partnerships of all kind. The 26 is the compound key number of the name. Oh, sorry, if it is. It might be best to change the name to achieve a more fortunate influence. If 26 is the birth number, and therefore cannot be altered, the person is counselled to avoid partnerships, to pursue the career alone, not heeding even the well-intentioned advice of others. It's pretty harsh if you're a 26 person, but follow only the personal hunches and intuition. Although these should be carefully examined for flaws before acting on them, 26 people should begin at once to stabilize the income, to save money and not behave in an extravagant manner or invest in other people's ideas. Invest in your own future, be generous with others, especially those in need, but also build a solid foundation for the future for yourself. And the chapter on 4 and 8 is quite useful in star signs. So that's basically Vitality. It's the only album, other than Riot Act, with both an 8 and a 4. So it's got a 4 in the date and an 8 in the name. Riot Act is the reverse, an 8 in the name without any compound number. Oh, sorry, an 8 in the date because it was released on the 8th of November, and 13 as the compound number. And I've already gone through the 13, but I'll mention 8. So the meaning of the 8 vibration: people or entities with number 8 are normally quite reserved and shy. They don't obviously push ahead, but slowly and surely they will get where they want to go, and nothing will stop them from achieving their ambitions. The shyness and reticence is a cover for an intense drive to reach the top of the profession or career. They make excellent teachers and counsellors. Most of them could be successful in the tough game of politics, although now and then there's a sour apple in the barrel. But they excel at anything that requires patience and intelligent deduction. Those influenced by the 8 vibration may be poor in health in childhood, but they grow more robust when they reach maturity, and longevity is common with 8 men and women. These people are willing to wait for their plans to bear fruit and use the waiting time wisely. It's rare to find an 8 person procrastinating or goofing off. I won't go through the entire, I'll leave it there if you want to read it, but it's interesting. Again, it mentions the 4 and 8 at the end of the chapter. Anything that adds to a 4 or an 8, it's good to read that chapter about fate and destiny. And no code was the 4, the 31 flipped around, so I'll do the 31. The 31, the recluse, the hermit. Those whose birth or number is a 31 should first read the analysis of the foregoing compound number 30. If you watch the intro to this channel, I actually go through the 30 because that's who I am myself. But the 31 is very similar to it, except that the person or entity represented by this number is even more self-contained, self-sufficient, lonely, and isolated from others. Quite often genius is present, or at least high intelligence. At some unexpected time in the life, the glittering promises of the world will be suddenly rejected for the peace and quiet of nature. Or if the response to the 31 is not quite that pronounced, there will nevertheless eventually be a degree of retreat from society in some manner. The 31 person is sometimes opinionated and advocate of political change while remaining fixed in personal habits. Even in a crowd, a 31 person will often feel a sense of loneliness and isolation. And it mentions that chapter of Fate and Destiny for the 4 and 8. No code is 31, the Recluse, the Hermit. Riot Act is the 8 and the 4. So Riot Act in many ways has the highest karmic influence. Binaural is actually less popular than Riot Act and Pearl Jam, but actually doesn't have that bad a vibration. But I'll go through the 16. You can do the 7 and the 3 yourself. The 3 I've actually already mentioned a part of it in my introduction, but 17 is quite interesting about religion and spirituality. So 16, the Shattered Citadel. If you ever meet anyone born on the 16th of the month, if you mention some of these things, it's actually really an interesting number because there's no other number that is as precise and graphic. 16 is pictured by the ancient Chaldeans as a tower struck by lightning from which a man is falling with a crown on his head. It warns of strange fatality, also danger of accidents, and the defeat of one's plans. If the name equals the compound number 16, it would obviously be wise to change the spelling to avoid this vibration. If the birth date is the 16th day of the month, the challenge of the 16 must be carefully met, so that its effects may be diluted to a milder vibration. To avoid the fatalistic tendency of the 16 as a birth number, one must endeavour to make all plans in advance, making certain that any possibility of failure is anticipated and circumvented by careful attention to detail. The 16 brings with it the single number 7's obligation and responsibility to listen to the voice within, which will always warn of danger through dreams or the intuition in time to avoid it. So the inner voice must not be ignored. As Linda explains the star signs, Abraham Lincoln was a 16 and was warned repeatedly of his potential assassination in his dreams, and also by several sensitives or mediums who were brought to the White House by Mary Todd Lincoln. He did not heed any of these clear warnings and refused to take, clear warnings, like he might not have believed in any of that stuff, and refused to take the necessary precautions. Therefore was unable to avoid his fate. But it could have been avoided, and this is important for the birth number is 16 to remember. To find happiness in ways other than leadership at the top, the tower and the crown, to renounce fame and celebrity, is another way of decreasing the negative aspects of the 16. So the more popular you are as a 16, the more danger you could be in. Lincoln did not choose to do so, feeling it was more important to attempt to keep the nation united than to enjoy the fulfillment of a private life, although he accepted the presidency with much reluctance and a profound sadness. So the 16 of binaural is what's going on there. 21, the crown of the Magi. 21 is pictured as the universe, and oddly enough, binaural, on the cover of binaural, is the Hourglass Nebula, and all throughout the artwork is universal imagery, even though binaural itself, meaning hearing through both ears and the process of recording through both ears, and was one of the first albums to do that. I find it funny anyway that the 21 mentions the universe, and is also called the Crown of the Magi. It promises general success and guarantees advancement, honours, awards, and general elevation in the life and career. It indicates victory after a long struggle, for the Crown of the Magi is gained only after a long initiation, much soul-set testing, and various other tests of determination. However, the personal entity blessed by the number 21 may be certain of final victory over all odds and all opposition. There's a most fortunate vibration, a number of karmic reward, and again, as a massive Pearl Jam fan, binaural is one of the best Pearl Jam albums for the stylistic integrity and certain songs. There's a few, it's just a great album, and also the B-sides. If you go to YouTube to look for binaural 2, there's actually a bunch of songs that didn't make the cut, and they're also beautiful and amazing. But the issue with binaural, I guess, is it doesn't have these 1927s and so on of the more successful, and it's just a very strange album. And you'll notice that Gigaton isn't too bad. Also has a 27 and the 24. So in fact, Gigaton over time you would expect should be pretty popular. They're both two of the best numbers, and yet it is below some of these other albums. like the album Vitology. So I do find that interesting. I personally love Gigaton, like every song, like it's an amazing album. So anyway, this is popularity of who's listening to it at the moment, but it should be in the long term as well. So regarding singles, you can see that Last Kiss is the most successful single. The least successful, Running, Wreckage, Jeremy, Dance, and The Clairvoyants. Well, they're not the least. The least is actually Lightning Bolt, and Jingle Bells, and Santa God, and so on. And I've sort of highlighted the 4s and 8s through here. But yeah, I mean, this live Josh's pick, I mean, who even knows what that is, even though it's the 27, we don't know what that is really, you know. Anyway, in terms of songs, the most successful songs are off 10, so as I mentioned, 10, the date that they were released was the 27th, likewise with Verses was the 19th, and the biggest songs were Even Flow, which had a number of 27, Alive had 16, Black is 11, 14 is 10. I should mention that 10, the number 14, so if you type in 10 and hit compound name, you get the number 14, which is Movement Challenge. Magnetic communication with the public through writing, publishing, and all media-related matters is associated with the 14. Periodic changes in business and partnerships of all kinds are usually beneficial. Dealing with speculative matters brings luck. Likewise, movement and travel associated with combinations of people and nations can be fortunate. However, both gains and losses are sometimes temporary due to the strong currents of change, which are ever present. 14 warns of danger from accidents related to natural elements, flood, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, tempests, and so forth. This is not absolutely merely a warning to be cautious. There is risk involved in depending on the word of those who misrepresent a situation. It's a mistake to rely on others. Rely on intuition, the self, the voice within. The luck of 14 includes money dealings and speculative projects or betting, but there's always a danger of loss due to wrong advice from others or overconfidence. The funny thing about 10 is some people think it was overproduced, and over time people are starting to think it's not as great as it could have been, but you know, then there are also people that still love Pearl Jam because of 10, and in fact every song on 10 is a classic, and in fact I'm working on a score for Black, for example, because I think it could be incredible. So 14 is actually quite amazing in terms of magnetic communication with the public through writing, publishing, and all media related matters. You can't go wrong with that. So in terms of the least performing singles, Better Man is actually a 22 off Vitology, which as I mentioned is the 22 and the 26. Even though Better Man is still played a lot and loved a lot, I think it has that submission sort of warning over time. Likewise, Scared of Fear has a little bit of a 22 and 4 as well. And Won't Tell, even though a lot of people love it. Like, I mean, these are the top 10 songs, so they're still beating a lot of other songs. And in fact, these are all given that 19 as a date. But the compound numbers. So anyway, so the point of this deep dive is to really look at, you know, how we could name certain songs or albums, as well as look at the release dates. Anyway, I'm really interested to hear about your thoughts on whether any of this is correct, whether you think that it's all complete hocus, or if there is merit. But I personally think that, yeah, this is really good evidence of how powerful and correct and accurate this system is. See you next time.